Welcome to the Felonious Scribe. We're your hosts,
Dawn Hosmer
and Kristine Raymond, writers of mystery, mayhem, and murder. So, Dawn, you want to tell us what we're about?
Yes. Welcome to our first episode, and we want you, the viewers, to just feel like you're coming to sit down to chat with us for a few, have a cup of coffee. We want this to be very casual and let you know, get you into our minds just a little bit. Not that you want to be there, but good luck. So that's kind of the goal of this show.
And we're going to have a lot of fun, so you will probably see a lot of laughter and maybe just a little bit of goofing around. But hey, you know, that's what casual means.
Exactly. And I've got my coffee ready, so.
And your Luke Steiner cup from the Gilmore Girls.
Exactly. Gilmore Girls one side, Luke's the other.
There you go. Well, what we decided to do, Dawn and I, is take questions that viewers submit to us that have something to do about murder or mystery or mayhem or something along those lines, because Dawn writes psychological thrillers, and while I write in a variety of genres, my most recent is cozy mystery. So that's kind of what we would like to explore. And recently I saw in the Facebook group Cozy Mystery Friends that Rox T had submitted this question. How does someone as nice as you come up with such heinous murders, bad guys, and how do you sleep after writing a particularly brutal scene? Dawn, take it away, because your crimes are a little more heinous than mine are.
Yes, mine all occur on the page, whereas I think with cozies, they tend to occur off the page. How does someone as nice as me? Well,
and I can testify that Dawn is a very nice person, so she paid me to say that.
Thank you. I'll send your check. I'm a very anxious person by nature, and I tend to write about things that scare me, which is everything, literally. I could write a book about anything and make it scary. So part of what I try to do in my writing is bring light to some very important things that really happen in our world. So my antagonist or my bad guy is always based off of things that really go on in this world. And sometimes that makes readers uncomfortable. And I have gotten, I've had to put some trigger warnings on my books. And, it makes people uncomfortable, but I want to bring light to the fact that these things really happen in the world. So that's kind of how someone like me comes up with a character like that. I watch a lot of true crime TV. I love shows like Criminal Minds. I worked in social work my entire career. So I kind of understand the human psyche, and not always the pretty sides of the human psyche. And I try to put that
right.
As far as how do I sleep at night, not well. But that has nothing to do with what I write. That's more because I'm an anxious person and I have a chronic illness. So those two combined keep me from sleeping well at night. But what about you, Kristine?
I've never really given it much thought as to how I come up with them. They're just, for me, my characters just really pop into my head. I don't give a lot of thought to them. I mean, I do as I'm developing them, but initially it's just like, you know what? I think that person right there would make a really good bad guy. And as you mentioned with the cozies, my crimes are off the page, so I don't really get that in-depth detail as to the crimes. Although going to my historical Western in Here to Stay, I did have the bad guy dispatched. Well, something happened after he was dispatched that was kind of gruesome, but I won't go there. He deserved it. Let's just say that he deserved
He
it.
got what was coming to him.
But I grew up reading true crime because, like you, I mean, I just was fascinated by what makes a person do the things that they do. I still to this day I don't read as much true crime because honestly, it sort of bothers me now, which I find funny because when I was 20 years old, I had no problem going camping by myself in the woods, secluded, pre-cell phone and all of that, with a stack of true crime and read all this stuff, and that never bothered me. And now it kind of like turns my stomach a little bit. But what does make a person who looks normal, is our next door neighbor, or even sometimes a relative, a parent, a brother, a cousin, whomever, and not just, I mean, those were all male that I just listed, but it could be female too. But what happens in their brain that makes them do what they do?
Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what drives my writing as well, is that question, what if, and what makes this happen? And everything I've written to date has been inspired by something true that's happened, that's caught my attention, and sets my mind into overdrive thinking, okay, how did that happen? Why did it happen? What kind of motive could that person have had to do these awful things? And then I try to figure that out. And I think me writing it is a way of me almost making sense of it to myself. And
Right.
I'm not saying I figured it out and I'm smart and I got it all down. It's my way to process some of the things I watch, read,
Yeah.
hear about, things that personally affect me. And I think that putting them into a character actually sometimes helps because it gives closure where in real life we often don't get closure.
Well, and you told me that Bits and Pieces, which by the way, I just absolutely love, that was Dawn's first novel. Yay.
Thank you.
It's one of those that the second I finished it, I wanted to start rereading it. It is that good. But you told me that was based on a true story about some rapes and murders that happened on a college campus, and you have college-age children.
Yes.
So that I can see where that would be something that you would pick up on and be like, okay, if this happened in real life, my kids are in that same situation, not that situation, right, but in that same setting.
Well, and actually Bits and Pieces was inspired by a case that happened at my son's college. So
oh wow,
it was someone his friends knew. And so that's what inspired the story, because I was glued to the news during that and watching this unfold and just trying to make sense of it. Like, what happened? Why, when it turned out that the person that abducted and murdered this young lady that my son went to school with had been implicated and charged with other murders in the same area and rapes, that's kind of how the bad guy in Bits and Pieces was born, because it happens. And
yeah,
and that's one thing. I recently sent out advanced reviewer copies for my third book, Somewhere in Between, and I got one of my first reviews back, and the reviewer and I chatted via DM after she sent the review, and she's like, she's like, some people are going to be uncomfortable with this book because there is mention of rape. And she's like, but you handle it very well and don't glamorize it. And so that's something I want to make sure I never do, is glamorize
right,
violence towards women, men, children. but that doesn't mean we don't talk about them. And I feel like sometimes, especially because I'm active in the writing community on Twitter, I think sometimes we try to censor what people write too much because it might trigger someone. And I'm all about, I've told people that I know have certain issues, don't read this book of mine. Don't read The End of Echoes if you have a history with domestic violence. Just don't. It's going to hurt you. Like, so I'm very honest about that, but I'm not about censoring what we write, because I am all about trying to put onto the page in a fictional setting what real life human people go through that we don't talk about. People get raped. I hate it. I wish it would stop. People get murdered. I hate it. I wish it would stop. Same with domestic violence. And I don't know. I think it's good when a book makes us a little uncomfortable. It makes us look at something maybe we haven't been looking at.
Right. Well, and the other thing is too, as authors, we get to change the ending. We get to bring that closure to that family that maybe in real life the family didn't have, or get that child help that maybe a real life child that's being abused doesn't have, and we're able to offer that through our writing. And I think that's important too, because our stories may be based on real life things, but they're still fiction.
Right. Exactly.
And readers have to keep that in mind. We're not writing true crime.
No.
We're writing a story, and it's stories that happen to have mystery, murder, and mayhem.
Right. And when I say it was inspired by, I don't mean based on. I mean, I think there are books out there that are based on true stories and then are less fictional that way. Mine are inspired by. And what I mean by that is something got in my head that I couldn't let go of, and I needed to write a fictional story about it. So I think it is an important distinction to make, that yes, it's fiction. And we're not describing real people's stories. We're just taking pieces of what we've heard and putting them into a story.
And we're translating what's in our brain and how we process that story, and putting it on the page, and what we would have that bad guy do, or the heroine or the hero, and all of that kind of stuff.
Exactly. Go ahead.
No, I was done. I'm listening to my dog tap dance outside the door.
Yeah, my cat usually starts knocking on my door after having the door shut for about 5 minutes. I think as far as sleeping at night, we already established that I have trouble with that anyway. But I find that after I've written something particularly intense or particularly dark, I need to do something uplifting afterwards, whether that's watch my favorite show, The Gilmore Girls, something that's just mindless for me that I can watch and laugh, or read something totally outside of a psychological thriller or suspense, read a romance, read something happy. But when I'm in that dark spot with a book, I have to kind of debrief by doing something else.
Yeah, that makes sense. It really does. Because one of the things about writing the darker scenes is you're letting a part of yourself go. Like you're releasing them, and you're letting go of all of the boundaries that you have, and the things you've been taught to, not say that, not do that kind of thing.
Yep.
And you're really just letting your emotions drive it. And I know that most of our books are emotionally driven in some sense, but even to go back to Here to Stay, and I'm not going to give away what it is, but I mean, I debated, like I wrote it because it felt right, that this one part that happened to the bad guy. And then I sat and I debated. I'm like, readers aren't going to like that. It's going to bother them. So I took it out and I slept on it. And I got up the next morning and I'm like, you know what? It's right. It's what that character would do in that sense, it needs to be in there, and it's disturbing, but it fit. To me, it fit the character, but it was kind of like, I'm like, wow, I would never do what that character did, but it happens. What happens. So, I don't know.
And I think, probably
writing is so cathartic.
It is. And that's part of the conversation I just had with an advanced reader last night is I thought that Somewhere in Between was not based on a true story per se. I discovered that there was some truth inspiring it as I wrote it. And it really hit me as I was editing it. And I'm like, whoa, like, I can't, like, the connections hit me. And I'm sure as we go on, like, we'll talk more about our writing processes and kind of what that, but you and I think, are both pantsers, right? Okay, which means we start with an idea, we sit down and we write. And so I feel like oftentimes the characters tell me what to write. Like, they reveal who they are to me as I'm writing. And so therefore sometimes, like you said, something appears on the page and you're like later, ooh, do I want to leave that? But then when you sit back, you're like, that's kind of where the character drove it. Like, to keep it
was real. Yeah.
And with Bits and Pieces, it's like, well, with Bits and Pieces, I had to get into the mind of a serial killer. Like, to really write that character well, I had to get in that mind. I had to get in that headspace. In the End of Echoes, I had to get in the mind of an abusive husband and an abused child and a parent who lost a child. I mean, so it's emotional stuff to try to get into that headspace and think, okay, if I were this character, how would this impact me, so that I can translate that to the page.
The End of Echoes was difficult to read. That was a tough one. I mean, you did a good job with it, but yeah, just that, I don't know how you wrote that, honestly, because that was kind of rough.
It was rough to write. And for people who haven't read it, I really told the story from 5 main perspectives, but 7 really, if you include some of the little snippets I did. 5 different perspectives of how people handled really horrible tragedies in different ways. And so you talk about feeling a little split in the head, like, which character am I writing now? And I think that's maybe why I wrote that book the way I did. I tried to keep short chapters and switch viewpoints a lot, because sitting with one of those characters for very long, couldn't do it. Like, I needed to, like, switch. And with Bits and Pieces, people were like, write a sequel, which I'm finally starting, but I had to take a break. That was an intense book. Like, I needed to take a break. And something you've said to me that I think you should share with people watching is that sometimes you like to kill people on the page as a way to kind of get out some of your frustrations in real life.
I think a lot of authors do that. But yeah, sometimes my victims, well, I don't want to say they're deserving. I don't mean it that way, but, well, in Finagled, one of the victims wasn't a very nice person. So again, I'm not saying this person deserved death. I don't mean it that way, but had this character been a nicer person, the outcome would have been different. Let's just put it this way. But like in Finicky Eaters, the follow-up book that I'm working on, some of the victims are just innocent bystanders. And it's just, I needed some people to die, so I put them in there. And if they possibly resemble maybe people in real life, well, maybe. No. I won't reveal my secrets. And a magician doesn't show his tricks, an author does not reveal their secrets.
At least not in this episode.
That's right. That's right.
We'll get her there. Trust me. We'll wear her down.
Oh,
But I think
well,
we did a good job answering Rox T's question.
I think so.
If not, viewers, let us know. Kristine, can you do the closing? My computer's frozen up.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you for joining us. That is all for this episode, our debut episode of the Felonious Scribe. Join us next time as we continue our exploration into the dark and twisty side of writing. And remember, life's more interesting when you add a little mystery. And if you would like to see Dawn and I answer your question on one of the episodes, there will be a link down below where all the other good stuff is, where you can submit your questions to us, and we may just choose it and entertain you for however long this was.
Thanks so much for watching, guys, and we hope you'll come back. Feel free to subscribe to our channel.
Yes.
And leave comments if you have anything to add to our discussion.
Thanks. Bye.